The Battle Partners set has been released in Japan and will be releasing in just a month in the West as Journey Together. This set brings with it some extremely powerful new cards for the Gym Leader Challenge format, and while I still intend to do a GLC set review for Journey Together, I felt that two of the new threats in Journey Together deserved their own deep dive into how they might be played and what players can do to counter them, which are Wailord and the Hops colorless Pokemon. By the way, the amazing Weeder over at Cardboard Warriors just posted a similar blog on the CBW site talking about the upcoming Journey Together format and how players should prepare, and I absolutely recommend you go read it. Weeder's skill and knowledge of the GLC format is frankly unmatched. But I'll be going deeper on these particular cards and talking about some things that weren't talked about in that article. So let's talk about the Wailord first. Luckily, this isn't an owner's Pokemon, so it can't be run alongside the other Wailords in GLC, but it is definitely an upgrade in my opinion. It has a whopping 240 HP compared to the 200 of the previous two Wailords. It has 4 retreat to match and the standard weakness to lightning. It also boasts an improved 4 energy hydro pump attack, doing 10 plus 50 damage for each attached water energy. In terms of durability, technically the Special Wave Wailord required a 230 damage attack to knock out, 260 damage to knock it out with 2 attacks, but at least its ability could be circumvented by ability lock and by things that place damage counters instead of dealing damage. No such counterplay with this new Wailord. This thing needs 24 damage counters to KO it, full stop. With 4 energy, this Wailord does 210 damage, less than the 240 of the Special Wave Wailord, which coincidentally is one of the few Pokemon that can one-shot this new Wailord. But the damage is uncapped, so you could do 260 with 5 energy, 310, so on and so on, the more energy put onto it. And unlike the other Wailord, you don't need a special energy, just regular water energy. So this new Wailord fits perfectly into a regular Rain Dance build, of which water has many possible options. It also doesn't require the energy to be basic water, so you can still totally power it up with cards like Splash Energy and even Reversal Energy. All of this makes for a Pokemon that will likely knock out anything that it attacks, and is likely to survive most attacks that GLC decks can muster against it, meaning it will be taking multiple prizes and discarding multiple Pokemon, while just giving up one prize itself. So why not just hit it twice and let it take its 2 prizes? You can just make up the difference somewhere else in the game with smart play, right? Well, aside from the fact that taking back-to-back prizes is what wins games in GLC, just punching the active here, as they say, you're opening yourself up to even further prize disparity from cards like Mallow and Lana and Acerola healing off all the damage you do, effectively nullifying your attack for the turn. Mallow and Lana will give it effectively 360 hit points, meaning you'll have to hit for 180 damage each turn twice to not give your opponent a 3-for-1 prize trade. And that's assuming they don't use VS Seeker to get it back on the following turn. So what can players do to beat this monstrosity without giving the opponent a huge prize lead? I'm going to talk about some of the ways you can try and counter this Wailord,
but also the countermeasures that Wailord player has available to it that may invalidate your attempts to counter it.
First, let's start with the literal weakness printed on the card, weakness to lightning. Any lightning Pokemon that can hit for 120 damage or more can theoretically take down Wailord in one hit. However, many Wailord decks will be packing a luxurious cape, in which case the lightning player will then need to be attacking for at least 170 damage. Wailord decks also have the option of running Weakness Guard energy to put lightning players back in the same pinch as all the other types trying to knock it out. And the funny thing about it is, even though Weakness Energy will lower Wailord's minimum damage down to just 160, there's actually no lightning Pokemon in the format with more than 160 HP that don't, well, suck. So generally, Wailord doesn't lose out on any KOs against the lightning deck by playing a weakness guard energy in its toolbox. Lightning decks that are counting on dealing with Wailord by hitting its type weakness may want to consider teching in an Enhanced Hammer or Temple of Sinnoh to make sure they can punch through that weakness guard energy. Wailord's next weakness is its attack cost, needing at least 4 energy to attack. We already mentioned the Rain Dancers in water, which can allow Wailord to be powered up and attacking instantly. So going after those things with gust effects can at least stop the Wailord from becoming a threat along with all the Rain Dance deck's other attackers. The problem with trying to take the strategy of gusting up their Rain Dance Pokemon though, is that Rain Dance decks tend to set up multiple Rain Dancers at the same time, just to prevent that type of thing. They are often running 2 Rain Dancers in their deck, and on top of that, they can use cards like Reversal Energy, Raihan, and Aqua Patch as a backup method of powering up their Wailord should their Rain Dancer go down and another backup be unavailable. So be careful when you take a knockout against a water player that you're ready for the counterattack with something like Reversal Energy. Probably Wailord's greatest weakness is actually the Pokemon that it has to evolve from, Wailmer. Generally, Wailmer has to stay out for at least a turn before it can evolve and become a threat, and that's your opportunity to boss it up and KO it while its HP is still manageable. Though you'll still need to be able to hit it for 130 since Wailmer also got an HP increase in this set for some reason as well. The only problem here though is that water decks will have no trouble putting Wailmer back into play with cards like Rescue Stretcher, Super Rod and Brooklet Hill, or good old Nessa, while their value engines and other attackers will remain untouched in the meantime as you're trying to knock out the Wailmer. You also have to have the boss or similar card ready to go the turn that Wailmer comes down, and you have to have an attacker ready to go. But for some decks that can't reliably deal 240 damage in one attack, this might be the only way they can deal with a threat like Wailord without having to punch it multiple times. If you're one of those players that only plays Guzma and your deck can't hit that 240 number, you may want to reconsider adding Boss's Orders back to your deck. Lost City is also very strong against water decks in general, especially if you have a way to search for it when you need it, so you can only need to deal with the Wailmer once if you can boss it up and KO it. Unfortunately, water decks also have Splash Energy, which not only puts the Wailmer back to their hand when knocked out, it also gets around Lost City, because the water player gets to choose which effect to apply first, the Lost City or the Splash Energy. So make sure you don't try to use Lost City while Splash Energy is attached, unless you have an Enhanced Hammer ready. They can also hide behind Articuno to prevent you from bossing up the Wailmer. So in that case, you would need something like Silent Lab or Escape Rope to counter it before you can play the boss. You could also try to bypass Wailord's HP altogether by just straight up knocking it out. If the Wailord player puts a special energy on it, you might be able to knock it out for just 1 energy with Haxorus or something like Single Strike Beedrill. Or you could try a Destiny attack with Annihilate or the Beedrill from Team Up, which will knock out your own Pokemon as well, though you'll most likely not avoid losing the prize race that way since you're again giving up multiple prizes to take just the Wailord down. But it's an option if you're desperate and you think you're going to get swept by the Wailord otherwise. Well, that would all work well, except that water also has Wash Energy in its arsenal, which will protect Wailord from any kind of automatic knockout effect that doesn't use damage. And you're probably not going to be playing Temple of Sinnoh in your Haxorus deck either. And if you try to use a card like Faba or Enhanced Hammer to knock the Wash Energy off, you no longer meet the criteria of having a special energy to get the KO with Haxorus or Beedrill, so that's kind of rough. Psychic at least has Dusknoir to be able to put 13 damage counters on it, meaning that they only have to then deal 110 damage to finish it off. But again, you're sacrificing a prize to be able to take 1 prize, and that still will put you at a prize deficit going into the Wailord's turn if they have a follow-up attacker. And Psychic actually loses one of its best counters to the original Special Waves Wailord, which was the Copycat Mimikyu with a special energy attached, which could knock out Special Waves Wailord, but won't be doing any more than 10 damage to this Wailord unless the Psychic player has Water Energy in their deck. You might be a spread deck and think that you'll just win by knocking out everything around the whale and taking all your prizes that way. But water decks are now more commonly teching Rough Seas, the stadium card that heals 30 damage, to counter spread decks instead of Manaphy, since it's much easier to get around Manaphy than to get around the 30 damage that gets healed from Rough Seas. Spread decks may want to consider teching in a Chaotic Swell to stop Rough Seas from undoing their hard work. Alright, so which Pokemon in GLC can actually just hit hard enough to straight up knock this thing out in one shot? Well, GLC does have some contenders that can bring the big damage, but you'll also need to make sure you have a way to deal with any defensive tools like Luxurious Cape or Pod Helmet that might be messing up your knockout damage. Water has some of the best, which is kind of annoying since water can just play the Wailord itself, but you do have access to Feraligatr, which can hit for 280 damage, as well as Poliwrath, which can bounce itself back to the deck and hit for 240 damage. It actually has a whole deck archetype dedicated to it, which is kind of cool. In metal, you've got Copper which not the version from Shrouded Fable, but this one can actually hit for 240 if there is a damaged Pokemon on your bench. You've also got this Melmetal, which can hit for 250 with a U-turn attached. You can just discard the tool and put it back into your hand. A card that has a whole deck strategy developed around it, but I don't see it played very often. And you've also got this Heatran, which can do 50 damage for each metal energy you discard from it when it attacks. So you do have to get 5 metal energy on it if you want to take a knockout on the Wailord. But with something like Matang and Bronzong, you could get 3 energy onto it that way, and then with something like Metal Saucer and attach from hand. Or if you're playing a Magnezone deck, which is basically a Rain Dancer in metal, it's actually not that hard to get that many energy onto this Heatran, and it could be a very feasible counter to Wailord in metal decks. Certain metal decks that can get lots of energy out. For fire, you've got Camerupt, and the Arcanine from 151 can do 240 damage. Skeledirge is a great card that is being played in most fire decks these days that can do 240 damage with 9 Pokemon on the bench. So as long as your water player opponent has 4 bench Pokemon and you've got a full bench, your Skeledirge will be able to take the knockout for just 2 energy. Some more niche builds also have access to Amazing Rare Reshiram, which can do 270 damage, so you have to build your deck around being able to get those energy onto it. And there's also a single strike Cinderace that, with 3 prizes down from the opponent, can deal enough damage to knock out a Wailord. There's a few options in fighting. You've got the Brilliant Stars Lucario, which I think is becoming a lot more popular lately, just because it can do much more damage than the Revenge Lucario, which only does 150 damage. This Lucario can build up with Roaring Resolve turn after turn until you get to the 3 energy on it, and then you attach an energy from hand. You can take a knockout with this Lucario. The only problem is it is very easy to gust up and knock out, since it has to take a couple of turns to charge up. So be careful about that. There's also a Groudon in the more colossal focused decks that are trying to ramp energy from the discard pile. That can, if you discard 4 energy from play, you can do 240 damage. And then we've got this Rampardos, which might see play. For 2 fighting energy, it does 240 damage, as long as the opponent has more than 3 cards in their hand. And if you can make the fossil work, this could be an answer. It's tough because it's a stage 2 fossil Pokemon, so it is kind of hard to get out, though you do have access to fossil excavation map, which can get your unidentified fossil out from your deck or your discard pile. And your opponent may play around it by getting their hand really low, but they'd have to get their hand down to 2 cards if they're taking a prize, which will put them up to 3 cards in hand. So if they have 3 cards and they take a knockout, they'll go up to 4. Obviously, you can also force it with Marnie or Judge, something like that, or Iono. So this could be something fighting decks might want to look at. And then finally, Annihilate is actually a pretty good candidate. It does 70 damage for each prize they've taken. So if they have taken 4 prizes for 1 energy, you can hit for 280. And with Grant, you could hit for 240 if they've taken 3 prizes. So there's another option in fighting. Colorless is actually going to kind of struggle with this. Even with the new Hops Pokemon, it's difficult for them to get up past the 210 mark. I think one of the best answers in Colorless is going to be this Chinchino, which can do 70 damage for each special energy card attached to it. Now, it doesn't count double energy twice, so you'll need to get 4 special energy onto it. But I think in Crazy Code Colorless, which can flood the board with special energy with the Porygon Z, it is feasible to get 4 special energy onto the Chinchino and be able to hit for the 280 damage with the 4 energy. There's not much else Colorless has going for it, so if you found the tech for how Colorless can one-shot this Wailord, let me know. Grass has a couple options. The Bramble Gas that you often see played, if you can roll 3 heads on the attack, you can do 240. So, with 6 energy, which is 3 energy cards plus Venusaur, you have a pretty good chance to roll 3 heads or flip 3 heads. You can also use Tapu Bulu with a Muscle Band that will hit for 240. In Dragon, we talked about Haxorus, which can also get the knockout with its Dragon Pulse attack with a Muscle Band. There's also a Regidrago that can hit for 240 for 3 energy, but generally you don't see it played because of the other Regidrago being so good at drawing cards, but it is an option. The new Eternatus sadly only hits for 230, but if you've got a Fighting Fury Belt or Muscle Band, you'll be able to take the knockout that way. Darkness is another type that might struggle to deal with this Wailord. You've got Weavile, which can do 250, but only if they've got 5 ability Pokemon in play. And the Wailord itself doesn't have an ability, so it seems unlikely you'll be able to take a one-shot with the Weavile. There is a Grimmsnarl in Dark that can do 240 damage if there are 3 or less Pokemon on your bench. It is a stage 2, but that is a potential option for Dark that I feel remains unexplored. And then I think Psychic might actually have the hardest time with this Wailord. I did mention they do have Dusknoir, which is a really good answer to it if you're playing that Dusknoir and not the one for spread. It does also have this Azumarill that can do 230 damage for 4 Psychic energy, but that is kind of tough to power up, and you're still going to need a Muscle Band in addition to the energy for that Azumarill. And then finally, there is the Technical Machine Crisis Punch, which any deck can use and gives you access to a 3 energy attack that does 280 damage if the opponent is down to 1 prize card remaining. And again, this is something that any deck can possibly use to take a knockout on the Wailord, but I feel like if your Wailord opponent is down to 1 prize, unless you're taking the game-winning knockout, this card will be very situational and may not help you solve your problem. All right, so that's our look at the new Wailord from Journey Together. And, actually this video has gone a little bit long, so I'm actually going to save the Hops Pokemon discussion for a part 2. I need to give my voice a rest here, but let me know in the comments, what do you guys think of the new Wailord? Do you think it is broken? Do you think it's fine? Do you think it's just similar enough to the old Wailord, or do you think it's even not as good as the old Wailord? I want to hear what you guys think about this and Journey Together as well. And thanks for watching. We will see you for the next video.